Into the Enchanted Forest, Book 1 of the Enchanted Forest series, by Alicia J. Chumney, Chapter 7. A few days after the event with the were-huntsman that Gabby refused to talk about, and the event that had her scratching her head in confusion, they stumbled onto some interesting footprints. The weird prints on the path had the trio scratching their heads. They were not dragon footprints. Seafoam was able to compare her foot to the print. Gabby thought that it was a giant chicken print. Only, why would there be a giant chicken in the Enchanted Forest? Uncertain how to address him after their kiss, she whispered cautiously, Ethan? Yes, he quickly answered her. He was incapable of keeping his emotions out of his voice. It was tinted with confusion and the other emotions he refused to address, but refused to stay buried. Why would the Enchanted Forest have a giant chicken? Still not looking at him, she studied the impression carefully, hoping that she was wrong. There were only so many stories about people who lived in a house with chicken legs, and there were so many things that could go wrong if her suspicions were correct. Ethan turned to look at Gabby with horror slightly etched into his expression. Giant chicken? Blue eyes met Hazel for one of the few times since he had pulled away from her. That's what the print looks like, Gabby pointed out. Drawing out his sword, he looked around the clearing. The threat was imminent. He just had to find it. There was a slim chance that this new development was not as dangerous as he feared. The princess had encountered her 3 enchanted forest trials, so why would the forest toss her towards this possible danger? Get between me and Seafoam, he commanded, not looking at her. Stubbornly, Gabby refused to move while she challenged his demand with a simple question. Why? This time he made eye contact when he answered her. Because I said so. It was the wrong thing to say. Gabby moved to stand in front of him. No, not until you tell me why. She didn't care how serious he was. Serious enough to make eye contact with her. Because she was just that annoyed with him. She was physically tired, and instead of returning home after her final quest like Jack had promised, she was facing some unknown threat once again. Not that Ethan Jack had been useful in the previous threat. All he'd really been good for was finding them food and starting campfires. Baba Yaga was all that Jack said in response. What? She asked, stepping backward. She didn't move away because she had never heard or read about Baba Yaga. She moved away because she wasn't expecting a Baba Yaga in the forest. Later, she would realize that not expecting a fairy tale just because it wasn't a popular tale didn't mean that it couldn't manifest itself into the enchanted forest. Ethan, channeling his inner Jack, maneuvered Gabby back where he wanted her, before returning to scan the area. A Baba Yaga has many stories. She is one of the dark sides of the fairy tales. I believe she can be from Russian or Scandinavian tales. Slavic? Definitely Russian. Pausing, he noticed the fence about 100 yards away. Roughly translated, Baba Yaga means old mother. But sometimes when she is spotted, she can be younger or older. But that is the thing about magic. Because there are several different tales surrounding her, there are several different Baba Yagas of various origins within the forest. None of them stay in one place. None of them have the same personalities. One tale has 3 Baba Yagas who are sisters. Some are helpful. Some would eat you rather than help you. In one tale, Baba Yaga has to answer the first question that you ever ask her truthfully. In another tale, she helped a Cinderella type girl, but the girl had to perform 3 extremely difficult tasks. He wondered if they should approach the gate, or if the forest would let them walk past without any trouble. If we see her, we would know which Baba Yaga is nearby. The ones we want to avoid would be holding a broom, a mop, or mortar and pestle. They all have a house that can move around because it is on top of chicken legs. Sometimes the house rests on the ground, and sometimes the chicken legs do not disappear, and the house rests on top of the visible legs. The house is surrounded by a fence made from human bones. Letting that sink in, Ethan continued in his role of protecting Gabby. He did not expect her to spot the fence and take off towards it. What are you doing? Turning to face him, Gabby started talking. Look, Ethan, maybe I should call you Jack right now because you are acting like a bodyguard and not like my friend. Pausing. Look, Jack, I've already faced my 3 Enchanted Forest trials. Since we cannot guarantee what Wonderland is going to give me, but the forest is not about to send me off to face any more dangers until it deposits me at the Wonderland Bridge. Now, I'm going to think carefully about the wording of my question. I suggest you do the same. She stopped at the fence, a skull turning to look at her. May I ask who's calling? Asked the skull. I am Gabby Harrington, she hesitated. I think. You are not sure? I'm a quester. My mother is the current queen of Wonderland. My adopted parents had the last name of Harrington, and my bodyguard, Jack, also known as Ethan, has not told me if I have a different last name. If the skull on the post could nod its head, Gabby thought that this one would. Do you have a question for the Baba Yaga? Yes, but I don't have it worded in my head yet. And do you, Jack Ethan? Jack glanced over at Gabby. I do have a question, but I do not want to know the answer to it. Fair enough. Turning to face Gabby once more, the skull advised. Think carefully of your question. The Baba Yaga is not currently in the cottage at the moment anyway. Her cat has gone to locate her and let her know that she has a royal guest. Trembling a little, the skull then addressed the dragon. Sadly, dragons cannot have questions answered. I do not have a question, Mr. Skull, but thank you for letting me know, Seafoam answered him, with a nod of her head. The fence intimidated her a little. She didn't know if the humans had noticed the other human skulls had turned to face their company. The three of them settled down by the road while they waited. Jack found them a log to sit on, while Seafoam curled up nearby and dozed. While they waited, Gabby considered her question. Jack, still in his bodyguard mentality, took stock of the cottage. He could tell there would be one room, unless the house was more magical than he assumed, and was bigger on the inside than it looked on the outside, and that there would not be a lot of things in that cottage. He knew that the skulls were all watching them. Baba Yaga, the skull at the gate announced, you have a visitor. Moments later, the door opened, and out stepped somebody approximately her adoptive mother's age stepped out. Come in, my dear. The gate opened for Gabby, but quickly closed behind her, locking Jack out. Wait a minute! You cannot go in there alone, he protested. Turning around, Gabby smiled before stating, I'll be okay. There's not enough room for 3 people and a dragon in my cottage, Baba Yaga's voice commanded. Only the person with the question may enter. That is one of my rules. I'll be okay, Jack. Closing her eyes, Gabby added, I need you to be Ethan right now and trust me. He watched her enter the cottage. Seconds later, he heard the skull next to his hand snapping, and removed his hand from the fence. Sorry. It is fine, the skull answered, making a movement that seemed as if it was nodding his head. The skull next to the gate started speaking. Our Baba Yaga is not going to eat your princess. The forest keeps the evil Baba Yagas from the princess questers. Unless, another skull added, it is a Cinderella quester. The skull managed to get a dreamy expression. Then she gets the difficult task, Baba Yaga. We sense that you do have a question, a skull on the other side of the gate commented. It is okay to ask. Jack softened up, dropping his bodyguard stance and once again becoming Ethan. He did have a question to ask. But I do not want to know the answer. I've been around her for so long, much longer than just our time in this forest. I've had to watch her in the real world in class, and as she spent time with her friends. But I'm a huntsman, and huntsmen do not get involved with the royal family. They did once, Seafoam piped up, opening a single eye to peer at him. A long time ago, and Alice married a huntsman. A Cinderella princess married a huntsman, and he became a prince. A little mermaid fell in love with the huntsman instead of her prince, and eloped with him instead of turning into Seafoam. Just because the original tales involved princes does not mean that the royal families have to marry princes now. A nearby skull, the fourth skull, started talking, and the original Alice did not start off as a royal. She was crowned in the second book. Turning to look at the skull next to him, they also have a long history of not always marrying into other royal lines. The skull by the gate piped up again. Are you certain that you do not want to know the answer to your question? Yes. Inside the cottage, Gabby observed the carefully made up bed, the clean floors, and empty sink, the closed cabinet doors, and the cat pretending to snooze by the fireplace. When they were situated at the lone table in the cottage, Gabby started to speak. I know I'm supposed to bring you something, but I have nothing. My dear, Baba Yaga smiled, the enchanted forest has already provided your offering. There was a fresh stack of firewood that appeared at the back of the cottage as soon as my house settled down here. I knew then that the forest was bringing me a question. Handing over a teacup, how about we chat and you can tell me about your journey before you ask your question? I think your young man needs to decide if he wants to ask his question or not. I wish I understood him, she sadly responded. Giving the princess in front of her a knowing smile, Baba Yaga gave the girl some grandmotherly advice. He needs to understand himself first. I think I love him, Gabby whispered. He has been around far more than just our time in the forest. We've had classes together where I've gotten to hear his opinion about reading assignments. I realize now that he has been following me, but that was part of his job. I've seen him giving classmates meals or helping them pay for food when they were short on cash or used up their meal plan allotments for the week. He let people he didn't even know use some of his copies at the campus computer lab because they had run out of free copies. I've seen him be generous. I've seen him be protective. I've seen him stop fights and prevent them. She paused in the middle of her memories. Spending all of this undiluted time with him has shown me how he thinks and feels. I don't want to be without him. Carefully, Baba Yaga pushed this conversation further. Is your question about him? Gabby took a sip, but she considered changing her question. No. Am I going to make a good queen? Baba Yaga's tone deepened as she started to answer the question. You are going to make a wonderful queen. Your subjects will adore you and your offspring. Wonderland will experience a prosperous period of time that will than just in be felt in far more than just you and your children's reigns. You will be known as fair and just among your chosen with your chosen king by your side. Gabby smiled as she wrapped Baba Yaga into a hug. Thank you. I wish I could tell you more. She herself wondered who the princess's chosen king would be. However, even Baba Yagas knew that sometimes magic gave a helping hand in forming bonds of true love. Looking the old lady in the eyes, Gabby allowed her emotions to show. That isn't necessary. I know who I would choose to be by my side. He just needs to realize it. Emerging from the cottage, she watched as Ethan chatted with the skulls and the dragon. It was Baba Yaga who spoke up. Ethan Jack, do you have a question for me at this time? No, ma'am. Giving him a warning, she hoped he would ask just to be able to end the emotional storm brewing between the two. I cannot guarantee that you'll be able to find me again. Taking a deep breath, Ethan answered her. I will take that risk. I am not certain if I want my question answered right now or not. Understood. All she could do was nod her head in understanding, even if she couldn't understand how stubborn a certain huntsman could be about affairs of the heart. They left the cottage, and as the Baba Yaga waved them off, she asked the skulls about what they talked to Ethan about. He loves her, but is afraid he cannot be with her, the gate skull answered. I think they will be, another commented. I think they won't, the third and fourth added. He won't do anything because of his perceived responsibilities.